If you haven't met them, they can introduce themselves.
Yeah, we'll do quick introductions. Hello, my name is Mike Norman. I'm also a program analyst with the refugee team. And Pedro is here as well. He can introduce himself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Pedro Blanco. I'm a program analyst with the refugee team, and I'm also the state refugee health coordinator.
And our awesome admin person is also on the call, Suzanne. Hi, Suzanne.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Glass, and I'm the admin for the refugee unit.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and share the slideshow and start going through the immigration statuses. If you have any questions, we will have time at the end to chat about those questions, or you can put them in the chat and we will answer them as we go through the presentation. So let me know.
Sorry.
Oh,
and just really quick, if it wasn't said already, we're recording this today. And this will be provided in a unlisted YouTube link that can be sent out later, so you can refer to it and share as needed. So that's all.
Yes, and we will share the slide deck as well. So for reference, if you want to look at a specific immigration status and what kind of documents you will see from that for that status, then you can refer back to it as well. So let's get started. So again, this is going to be dependent on everybody's contract. So we have a bunch of immigration statuses, but then we also have contracts where you serve one or two or maybe three of these immigration statuses, and then we have contracts where you serve everybody. So we're going to cover every immigration status, and if you have specific questions about who you can serve under your contract, please send an email to your contract admin person. So we can look at your actual contract language and make sure that you're serving the right immigration categories. So just a general overview, we at the refugee program, we can serve these eligible immigration statuses. So they are refugees, people whose asylum has been granted. So when we use the word asylee, it is a very broad term that even covers individuals who have applied for asylum. For the refugee program, we can only serve people who have received their asylum status. Individuals who have been paroled as refugees or asylees, we don't see a lot of this, but if you do, you can always send us an email and ask us, and we will let you know. The individuals who are paroled as refugee and asylee are separate from humanitarian parolees and the types of parolee statuses that you would see for Afghans. Cuban and Haitian entrants, again, this one is a little bit complicated. The next one is certified foreign-born victims of human trafficking and their family members. Again, we don't see a lot of these, but if you do, there are certain documents that you have to look at. Amerasians, also, we aren't receiving a lot of Amerasians, but just in case, it's an immigration category that we do serve, so we've put it on the list. Afghan and Iraqi SIVs. We do get a lot of Afghan SIVs. Iraqi SIVs, the numbers have reduced a little bit, but we're still seeing those also. And then there are specific country-focused humanitarian parole and other immigration statuses. So we have the Afghan special immigrant conditional permanent resident. We got a lot of these during the evacuation in 2021. We aren't seeing a lot of them, but if you do, there are some documents that you could look at to make sure that they are eligible. Afghan SQSI parolees, same. Afghan humanitarian parolees, these are still trickling in, but not at the numbers that they were coming in between 2021 and 2022. And then the Ukrainian humanitarian parolees, they are still arriving at a very large number, but there are certain date ranges that you have to keep in mind when you are trying to determine eligibility for these individuals. So let's dive into it, one thing I need to refer to. So there's a rule, an OAR, that you can always reference to see if somebody is eligible or not for ODHS benefits. And then there's also the OPEN, which is the Oregon Program Eligibility Notebook, if I'm not wrong. There's chapter 6 in that tells you which immigration statuses are eligible for which benefits, program benefits. So refugee cash, TANF, SNAP. So if somebody comes into your organization and says, well, I don't know if I'm eligible to apply for these benefits, and you look at their status and you think that they're eligible, that's a good reference tool to look at as well. We're probably going to ask you to look at that document when working with Cuban and Haitian clients, because the amount of documents that they arrive with, or the list is very long, so we didn't put all of it out here in the slide deck. Okay, let's start with each immigration category. So refugees, I'm pretty sure everybody out here is aware what constitutes a refugee, but just as a refresher, a refugee is somebody who has fled their home country and cannot return because I'm hearing interference. Could everybody please mute themselves? Thank you. So a refugee is somebody who has fled their country and cannot return because there's a well-founded fear of persecution based on their religion, race, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular political or social group. To be eligible for the refugee program, they must have been admitted into the U.S. under Section 207 of the INA. If they were not admitted under Section 207 of the INA, they do not meet the legal definition of a refugee, and therefore you can't serve them. So refugees who come into the U.S., they can present multiple types of documents. So the most common document that we see is an I-94, either the digital copy or the paper version of it. Up on the stamp is either on a letter, if it is a paper version issued by PRM from the Department of State, or it is on another document. But what is essential is that stamp. You need to look at that to make sure that it says that they have been admitted under Section 207 of the INA. That is the key thing for a refugee. Or they can have an I-94, a digital I-94, which has the refugee codes, which are RE1, RE3, RE4, RE1 to RE5, basically. Those are the refugee codes that we have. Or they can have Form I-766 with the code A04 or A03. The Form I-766 is basically EAD, an employment authorization document. Or they can have a IED approval letter for their derivatives. Or they can have a Visa 93 on their I-94 written. Again, we don't see a lot of this, but if you do, and they have that code on it, then they would be eligible as refugees. Or they have I-571, a refugee travel document. Again, we don't see a lot of it. The most prevalent type of document we would see from refugees is an I-94, either a digital copy or a paper copy, and it has that stamp that denotes the section of the INA under which they were granted entry into the U.S. So that is basically the sort of document you would mostly see. But if you see any of the other documents that have those specific codes on them, or say Section 207 of the INA, they would be eligible as refugees to receive services. Asylum granted. So this is, again, pretty similar to refugees. So the difference between refugees and asylees, or people whose asylum has been granted, is they are both unable to return to their country of origin based on the same criteria. But the difference is that somebody who applies for asylum applies when they are here in the United States. Refugee status is granted to somebody when they are overseas, mostly in a third country. the section of the INA is 208 that you would see on their documents. Same sort of documents you can expect from people whose asylum has been granted. You can have I-94 that has the stamp that says admitted asylum under 208 of the INA, or you can see the codes AS1, and again, don't worry about remembering any of these codes. We will send you this document so you can refer back to it and see what codes each immigration status has, so you can ensure that people aren't falling through the cracks and we are serving everybody. So people whose asylum has been granted, they can have other documents as well, like an order granting them asylum by an immigration judge, an asylum approval letter from USCIS, a written decision from the Board of Immigration Appeals, or they can have I-766, which is the EAD document with the code A05. Or they could have a refugee travel document. So individuals who are granted asylum, they can apply for a refugee travel document so they can travel abroad. So they might have that document as well. Now, refugees and asylees, they usually adjust their status to LPR after 1 year of having that status. So they can apply after 1 year and they can get LPR. In those cases, they will have a I-551, which is the green card. And there are certain codes that you have to look at on their green cards. I think it's GA678 and AA678 for people whose asylum has been granted, and for refugee, I can't remember. But again, those codes are on the slide deck, so you can refer back to them. Next immigration category is Cuban Haitian entrants. So this is a very complicated one because Cuban Haitian entrants could arrive here through different means, and they're granted different statuses when they come to the US. So it's a little bit tricky. There's a long list of documents that they can present, but we have broken it down into generally what you would see. So they're either paroled into the US and they would have either a parole document or they would have an I-94 that says parole. They're granted a special status for individuals from Cuba or Haiti. Again, this will be on their I-94. There are a couple of codes that you have to keep an eye out for. Or they have entered the US and they are not subject to a final, non-appealable, and legally enforceable removal order, which means that they came here into the US, they were not paroled, they have either a notice to appear or they are in removal withholding, so they would present a couple of different types of documents to you, which we will look at. I have sample document types as well, pictures of them that is part of the slide deck. So they will show you one of those documents, and that will determine whether they are eligible or not. Now, I want to point out that a Cuban or Haitian individual that is granted TPS is not eligible. TPS does not grant eligibility for any of the immigration categories that we have. A person could be eligible because they have an underlying status and then they got TPS, but it doesn't work the other way around. Like, if only TPS doesn't make anybody eligible. And I specifically referenced Open Chapter 6 non-citizens because if I had listed all of the document types that you could see for Cuban and Haitian entrants, that would have been 6 or 7 slides out here. So for Cuban and Haitians, I would refer you to that Chapter 6. It's a couple of pages. It lists all of the types of documents for these different Cuban and Haitian entry methods. So whether they were paroled, whether they were granted a special status, or whether they are in removal proceedings and there is no final, non-appealable, or legally enforceable order against them. Okay. Next is victims of human trafficking. So victims of human trafficking, again, we don't see a lot of these, but these are foreign-born individuals who have been brought to the U.S. And they have been placed in forced servitude, usually sex work or labor. They're considered modern-day slaves. Again, if for somebody to be deemed a victim of human trafficking under the law, they have to have either a certification or eligibility letter from ACF, Office of Trafficking in Persons, or they would have a Form I-797 with specific codes. Their derivative family members can also present Form I-94s, and they have the T codes on them. So they have T2 to T6 for the family members. So for an individual who has been a victim of human trafficking, you would see the letter, the certification letter from ACF. For family members, the ACF does not issue those letters. You would have to look at the T codes on their I-94. And then again, similar to other immigration statuses, they can adjust their status to LPR. And if they do, then on their green card, you would see the codes ST7 through ST9. Amerasian. So Amerasians are individuals from Vietnam defined under Section 584 of the Foreign Operations, Export Financing, and Related Programs Appropriate. That's a mouthful. Of 1988. These are individuals who have U.S. citizen father, and they were born in Vietnam after January 1st of 1962 and before January 1st of 1976. Because it is that short time frame, that is why we don't see a lot of Amerasians anymore. That number has gradually and significantly declined throughout the past few years. But if you do see somebody who comes in with an I-94 that has the codes AM1 through AM3, or they have a green card that has the codes AM6 through AM8, they will be an Amerasian. They could also have Vietnamese passports or US passports that have the codes AM1 through AM3 on them as well. Again, we don't see a lot of Amerasians, but if you do, you can provide support to them under the refugee program. Iraqi and Afghan SIVs. So there were a few laws by Congress passed that granted or are the ability to provide services and benefits to Afghan and Iraqi SIVs. The main section of the INA that actually granted that ability was Section 101A27 of the INA. So these are individuals who were employed by the U.S. government during the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. They served as interpreters and translators, or sometimes they served in other roles as well. I came to the U.S. as an SIV. And it's a very long process for applying for the SIV visa. You apply through the Department of State. You go through all of the systems. And an SIV who comes into the US, they would usually have either an Iraqi or Afghan passport with the codes SI1 through SI3 or SQ1 through SQ3, or their derivatives could have the SI6 through SI8 on their immigration documents. They can also have, usually when they arrive here into the US, once their passport is stamped, they become LPRs immediately. And therefore they would sometimes have their green cards, and the codes that you would see on their green cards is SI6 to SI8 or SQ6 to SQ8. Some of them usually might not get their green card immediately, and they might get a employment authorization document. And again, the codes that you would see on that is the SQ1 through SQ3 or SQ6 through SQ8. Again, a lot of codes, but the good thing is you don't have to remember them because we have that reference document that you can look at, which will be sent to you. Afghan Special Immigrant Conditional Permanent Residence. This was created specifically during the evac for Afghan individuals who had applied for an SIV before being evacuated from Afghanistan, but they hadn't gone through the whole process of being granted that status. So what happened was they were paroled into the U.S. and then depending on what stage of the SIV process they were in, they were either granted a SI conditional permanent resident or they were granted a SQSI parole. So for SI conditional permanent residents, the types of documents they would show you would be a foreign passport with the code CQ1 through CQ3, or they would show you a green card which has the code CQ1 through CQ3. They can also show you an employment authorization document with the code C11 on it. I mentioned this briefly when I was talking about SICPRs. This is the SQSI parolees. These were individuals who were in the earlier stages of their SIV process, and instead of granting them a conditional permanent residence, they were granted a parolee status, but they could adjust to a SIV by going through the process and completing it. Similar to the SICPRs, they could have a foreign passport that has the code CQ1 through CQ3, or they would have I-94, which has the code SI or SQ on it. It's SQ4 or SQ5, or they would have an employment authorization document, which has the code C11. Afghan humanitarian parolee. So a lot of you have contracts specifically for Afghans, and that's why you would see the statuses of SQSI parolees, the SICPRs, the SIVs, but more importantly, you would see a lot of Afghan humanitarian parolees. Now, every Afghan humanitarian parolee is not eligible for receiving services. For an Afghan humanitarian parolee to be eligible to receive services under your contracts, they need to have arrived between July 31 of 2022 and September 30th of 2023. That is very, very important. Now, excuse me, there are a couple of exceptions to that. A spouse or an unmarried child of somebody who was paroled during that period, if they come into the US after September 30th, 2023, to join their family member, then they would be eligible as well. But that relationship has to be established, and the original parolee needs to have arrived during that time frame. Similar situation for parents or legal guardians of unaccompanied children who were paroled earlier during that period. If they arrive after September 30th of 2023 and that relationship is established, then they would be eligible for receiving those services. And Afghan humanitarian parolees, most of the time what you would see would be an I-94 with the codes OAR, OAW, PAR, DT, paroled. You might also see employment authorization documents with the code C11 for them. Or you can see an interim notice of parole. We saw these a lot when people were getting paroled at the U.S. southern border. Or you can see a foreign passport with something that looks like a U.S. visa sticker and the code parses on it. And that's a recent thing as well. That's something that happened in 2023 last year. Ukrainian humanitarian parolees, very similar to Afghan humanitarian parolees, but there's a caveat. So for Afghan humanitarian parolees, it is only citizens or nationals of Afghanistan who are eligible. For Ukrainian humanitarian parolee, it could be a citizen or national of Ukraine who is paroled between February 24 of 2022 or September 30th of 2023, or a non-Ukrainian individual who last habitually resided in Ukraine, who was paroled between February 24 of 2022 and September 30th of 2023. Again, really important to keep an eye out for those dates, because if somebody arrived after September 30th of 2023, they would not be an eligible Ukrainian humanitarian parolee unless they are a spouse or an unmarried child of somebody who arrived earlier as a UHP during that time frame, or they are the parent or legal guardian or primary caregiver of a unaccompanied child or unaccompanied refugee minor who was paroled earlier during that time frame, and they are coming in later on to join that family member here. Again, it's really important that the person who was paroled originally was paroled during that time frame, and then that relationship is established. Also, regarding non-Ukrainian individuals who last habitually resided in Ukraine, they can either, if they're if they have the codes U for U on their passport or on their travel document, then they don't need to establish that they last habitually resided in Ukraine. But if they don't have those codes, then they have to present documents that show that they last habitually resided there, and those documents could be a driver's license or a ID issued by the Ukrainian government that shows that they last resided there before February 24th of 2022. The documents that you would see for Ukrainians who have the humanitarian parole status would be an I-94 that has the U for U code, it has UHP on it, or DT, or it could, sometimes it just says paroled under section 212 D5 of the INA. Or they could have an employment authorization document that has the code C11. So you've been hearing C11 a lot, and that is a code that you would see for a lot of the parolees. Okay. Now, eligibility period and eligibility date. So the eligibility date is the date the individual received their first ever immigration status that made them eligible. So if somebody was paroled here, an Afghan humanitarian parolee who was paroled here, let's say February of 2023, February 1st of 2023, that would be their eligibility date. Now, if they later on went and received asylum, and they received their asylum January 20th of, let's say, 2024, their eligibility date would still be the date that they got their parole, not their asylum date. The eligibility date does not reset once you get another eligible status. The original eligibility date remains. And that is because the eligibility period for services in general is 60 months for all of the immigration statuses, except for Ukrainian humanitarian parolees and Afghan humanitarian parolees. For them, it is the date the status was granted until the end of their parole. It is a little bit more for some Afghan humanitarian parolees, but that's a caveat that we would look at on a case-by-case basis. I didn't want to go into that much detail on it. So for UHPs and AHPs, the eligibility period is from the date that they received the eligible status till their parole ends, unless they get another eligible status, which is asylum or their parole got extended. So eligibility period for all of the services is 60 months, except for UHPs and AHPs, and then eligibility period for refugee cash assistance is basically 12 months. Refugee cash and refugee medical assistance, but that is issued by us at DHS, so you don't have to worry about that. Okay, we are at the end of the part of the presentation that included a lot of text and me talking a lot. Do we have any questions? Hi, Monica.
Hello, I have a question. Okay, so actually we were just sent a referral from another agency about a situation with a client who, so they were given, their EAD card says that they were granted TPS, but what they also sent to us was a notice to appear, which was dated in 2022, and the EAD card is now from 2023. I'm sorry, yeah, for their TPS was granted in 2023. Would they be eligible then?
I think this email was sent to me by Irina.
Right, same one.
Yeah. So I answered in the email. So it's TPS in itself will not grant eligibility, but because that TPS document is from a date that is after the original document, you would call the EOIR number, and I think I sent that in the email as well. So you would call the EOIR number and confirm that there isn't and this is regarding a Cuban and Haitian entrant. It's specific to Cuban and Haitian entrant. So you would call that number and confirm that there isn't a final non-appealable order of removal against them, and if that is the case, then you can serve them.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying.
As long as they're within 60 months. Again, eligibility period you have to keep an eye on as well.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I see another hand up, but I can't see.
Corso?
Hi,
Yeah.
Corso.
Yes, thank you. Can a TPS holder apply for asylum or vice versa?
I think everybody can apply for asylum.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's a limitation on who can and cannot apply for asylum. They can apply for asylum. If they're granted asylum, then they become eligible for receiving services. If they don't have asylum or any other underlying status and they just have TPS, then they would not be eligible.
Thank you.
Yeah. Tatiana?
Hello, I have a question. Like, do some organization have funds for those who are refugees but Ukrainians and came after September?
Well, Ukrainian refugees would be eligible for the general services that we are providing. So that would be the employment program that IRCO runs, senior services, some youth mentoring programs that we have. I think there are a couple of workshops, and then there's the ORCAS program, which is the school impact program that we run. They're eligible for all of those programs, but for specific Ukrainian funded services, they are not eligible, whether they came before or after, if they have a refugee status. And that's because the funds that came in, it specifically limited it to Ukrainian humanitarian parolees. And that was the case only for Ukrainian funds. For Afghan funds, it wasn't limited to just Afghan humanitarian parolees. They said all of the Afghan statuses, as long as they came here after, I think it was July 31st of 2020. Is it July 31st or July 21st? Sorry, I'm going back a little bit. July 31st of 2021. So that was specific to Afghans. All of the statuses were eligible, SIVs, asylum, refugee, it doesn't matter. But for Ukrainians, it's specifically Ukrainian humanitarian parolees.
Thank you. So I just ask about, like, can they go like refugees, not specifically for Ukrainians?
Yes, you can refer them to IRCO for employment services, or you can refer them to Lutheran for ORCAS, and then the youth mentoring contractors. I don't remember all of them, but I think
any housing assistance programs?
Not housing assistance funded by ODHS.
Okay, thank you.
What I don't want to say ODHS, not housing assistance programs funded by the refugee program within ODHS.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Irina?
Yes, thank you. Can I ask you about the situation, again, about Ukrainians? When those who have parolee, they are receiving temporary protection status. And we have situation when they have both valid documents and both valid status. Does it mean that we can serve them until their parolee expired? Does it mean that it's like
Yes.
red signal for us?
Yes,
Mhm.
that is correct. But I saw a couple of days ago, or it might even have been yesterday, the USCIS, I think, extending paroles on a case-by-case basis for people whose parole is expiring. So as long as they have a parolee status, you can serve them. If their parolee status ends and they only have TPS, then you cannot.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Maria?
Hi, I have a question related to different nationalities, not Afghan or Ukraine. If I have a refugee and from their status, they will finish the 60 months, like after 1 month or 1 week, and it will be expired. Should I enroll them, give them services, and then I know that they are not going to be eligible, so I can close their case after providing the services, or if it's immediate services or so?
So you can serve them as long as they have not hit that 60-month period. And again, you would have to make that determination on a case-by-case basis. So if you're providing a service that is pretty immediate, that you think if you provide it and you close the case, everything is going to be fine, then absolutely. But again, you would have to make that decision because
If I know that from the date of eligibility, it's just gonna be 1 week or 2 weeks, and they will hit the 60 month. So should I enroll them or refer them to another program from the beginning?
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that you can enroll them. Whether you would enroll them or not, that's a decision you would have to make, because we cannot say blanket yes or a blanket no on that. You can enroll them.
Okay, thank you.
And Sohail, there's a question in the chat about if we can accept EAD cards as eligible documents.
Yes, for certain immigration statuses, you can, if they have a specific code on them.
And, I would refer you to the link that I placed in the chat for the status and documentation requirements for OR eligible for the programs. If you go to each population, you will see next to it the documentation that you can accept, and it will break down in many of those what the type of documentation that we could take from them.
Yeah, so thank you for putting that there, Pedro. But I wanted to say, so in hierarchy, if you're going to be looking at documents, first look at this slideshow, which I'm going to send you, and the immigration documents, they are listed on the notes section of the slide. So you can't see them right down, but they're there. I've listed them all in there. So first look at this document. If you can't find it here, then go to open. And if you can't find it in open, then go to the ORR website. Because there are some things that we have received instructions from ORR that those are eligible documents, but they're still not on their website. For example, the code parses. And if you still have questions, please send us an email. All right, did anybody else have questions?
There's another one in the chat. Is there a chance to get updates on eligibility status, verification documents, law amendments for today's participants?
don't think I understand that. Can you clarify a little bit, Arena?
Yes, for example, if UCIC accepts any amendments that concerns eligibility of the served refugees or kind of client, can we get any updates from DHS, like newsletter or email, that please pay attention, there is amendments that we should?
Yes. So if a new status becomes eligible, or even if they amend a specific immigration status and say you can now accept these other documents as well, we would let you know. We would send you probably an email, and we usually talk about it at our monthly CBO and monthly refugee program meetings.
Okay, great.
Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna move on to the pictures of the immigration documents that I have. So I said this is the most common immigration document that you would see, the I-94. So you will either see the digital version of this, which is on the left, or you can see a paper copy of the I-94, which is on the right. And so there are a few information pieces that you need to keep an eye out for on the I-94. So it would have the person's first name, last name, date of birth, their passport number if they have one, date of entry. The most important thing that you have to keep an eye out for is the class of admission. And then most of the times it will have their A number on there as well. So when you get an I-94, make sure you look at the class of admission, you look at their date of entry, and then also their A number, which is over here. But sometimes it's not here. Sometimes they put the A number and the document number over. I think there is another line that has document number on it, and sometimes they would put it over there. If you don't know where the A number is located, you can always send an email to us, and we'll try and find it. Because USCIS and Customs and Border Patrol, they kind of switch it up on us sometimes. Same for the paper I-94. So it would have most of that information, but if you are seeing a paper I-94, it needs to have a stamp on it. If it doesn't have a stamp, then it's not a complete I-94. All right. Next document, this is just a sample of the green card. Again, it has most of the information on it, first name, last name, country of birth, the A number, which is written as USCIS number here. And I think this is an older copy of the green card. It has changed a little bit, but the format basically stays the same. They just change the graphics. And then make sure you look at the immigration category. This is not a eligible immigration category. As you can see, IR1 is not a code that would be eligible. So if you see a AS1, or if you see RE1 on there, or if you see SI1 or SQ1, then those would be eligible immigration categories. All right. Same employment authorization document, looks very similar to the LPR card. Has the same information on it, and then what you would be keeping an eye out for would be the category code, the A number, and then also when the card was issued and when it expires. A lot of the times you would see the code C11 on the category code. This is a document of somebody's passport that has a US visa on it. You would see there's a lot for SIVs. The visa in and of itself does not grant somebody a valid immigration status. It needs to have that endorsement, that stamp on it as well. So if it's a visa and it is stamped, then it will make the person eligible refugee or an eligible SIV or whatever their status is, if it has the proper date and the proper code on it. This is a travel document issued by the Department of Homeland Security. This is a refugee travel document, and asylees and refugees, if they want to travel outside the US, then they would apply for this, and this document shows eligibility as well. It has most of, it's kind of like passport, and it has all of their relevant information on it as well. Okay, this is where it gets tricky. So these only apply to Cuban and Haitian entrants. So remember when we talked about Cuban and Haitian entrants, we said they are either paroled. So if they're paroled, most of the time they would have an I-94. If they're not, or an interim notice of parole. If they're not paroled, then they would usually have either an order of release on recognizance or a notice to appear. And what this shows is that they came into the U.S. And they have been released on their own recognizance, which means they have been released by Custom and Border Protection or USCIS, and now they are allowed to stay in the US, but they have to appear before an immigration judge, and there's a date set on it. So if they have this document, they are a Cuban and Haitian entrant, they are eligible, but you have to call the EOIR number. That is key. Because if there is a final order of removal against them, then they will not be eligible. But mostly, though, usually there isn't that final order against them, because Cuban and Haitian entrants, they can adjust their status. And Pedro's putting stuff in the chat as well. Thank you. The next document that you would see is a I-862. This is a notice to appear. Again, sometimes they would have both the notice of release on their own recognizance and a notice to appear. Sometimes they would have either or. Again, if they have this document, you will take a look at the documents, you see that their information is correct, and then you would call the EOIR number to confirm that there isn't that final decision against them. They could also present a I-797, which is a notice of action. Similar to those other two documents, if you see one of these, you would have to call the EOIR number. And those were related to Cuban and Haitian entrants. Now for Cuban, Haitian, Afghan, or Ukrainian parolees, you might see sometimes you might see a foreign passport with just a parolee stamp. If you see a parolee stamp and you see the date on it, or you see that it says paroled under Section 212D5 of the INA, then for Afghan and Ukrainians, you would look at the date and see when they were paroled. For Cuban and Haitian entrants, it doesn't matter what date they were paroled. They would be a Cuban and Haitian entrant and therefore eligible. And this is the final document I have on here. This is an interim notice of parole. This is a fairly new document. We started seeing this in early 2023. So people who are arriving through the southern border, especially Afghan and Ukrainian parolees, but also some Cuban and Haitian entrants, they were getting this document, and sometimes it would have a picture, sometimes it would not. But what you need to keep an eye out for on this is it needs to say they were paroled under Section 212D5A of the Immigration and Nationality Act. All right, that's all the documents I have.
So Al, there's a question in the chat from Monica about Cuban and Haitian entrants. They're asking what documents do we see if there are entrant versus ROR released on their own recognizance or paroled?
Yes, so I am going to start sharing another screen now because okay, so on the Cuban and Haitian entrants slide, I put a link to this specific page. So this is our open chapter 6, and it talks about what kind of documents you would see from a Cuban and Haitian entrant. So if they are paroled, the Cuban and Haitian entrant, they would have these documents, an I-94 that says this specific code, or they would have an LPR that has a code CH6 on it. If they're a Cuban Asian entrant, this is also paroled, by the way. It would have the code CHP or HHP on their documents, or they would have a EAD that has the code A04 or C11 on it. If they are just a Cuban Haitian entrant and they have not been paroled, they would have any of these documents. I-221, order to show cause and notice of hearing, a notice to appear, or order of release on recognizance, a notice to applicant detained for hearing before an immigration judge. There's a bunch of documents listed here. Some of these we had sample copies of, and we see more prevalently. That's why I listed them there. But there's a bunch of documents that you would see, which is another reason I didn't put it on the slide deck, because it would have been too detailed. So you can see any of these documents for a Cuban and Haitian entrant who has not been paroled. And it's a very exhaustive list.
And so how Erin has her hand up.
Erin.
Hi, sorry, my computer went awry. I have a question. I was just wondering if the notice of warrant and the notice of action are two different things. And then with some of the community members that we've been working with, we see a notice of warrant and a notice to appear. Do they always go together?
I cannot speak to a notice of warrant because it is not listed as a document that we can accept for Cuban and Haitian entrants. But a notice to appear is something that is listed. Hold on. You know what? No, a notice of warrant is there as well. So they could come together or they could be separate. But if you so let me confirm: is a notice of warrant a 221S?
I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, it's just like those two papers are the ones that we see a lot with community members, and they're not Haitian or Cuban.
Okay, so they have to be Haitian or Cuban, and they need to have that document to be eligible. These documents are only, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I think I'm confusing myself as well. So not necessarily like Cuban or Haitian, but I forgot. Never mind.
And I have also seen documentation for those who are neither from Cuba or Haiti, that they are admitted and they're given those documents, and unfortunately those populations are not eligible for OR benefits.
Okay, I guess yes. Okay, thank you. That's what I was asking.
Okay.
Sorry.
Anyone else? I see a hand up, but I can't see whose name it is. Oh, it's still Aaron. And do you still have a question, Aaron? Nope.
No.
Okay. Okay. We are pretty close to time. I think we're going to end the meeting now so we can give everybody a chance to go and have lunch. If you have any other questions, feel free to send them to us. You can send them to anybody on the team who is your contract administrator, or you can send it to our refugee policy email. We will share the slides and the recording for this meeting. And then any new staff who are interested in taking the training, you could share the recording of the training with them. If you feel that there is another need for us to have another contractor training on specifically immigration documents, we can do that as well. We will just have to schedule it for maybe April or after. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.